Hey folks, today's episode's once again brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial by going to www.audibletrial.com/epicfails. Epic with a K.
Editor's note: this episode was recorded back in January 2021. Unfortunately, because Erik is really bad at time management and gave himself too many projects, he had to hold off on editing this one. Also, Chris forgot to plug in his headphones while we were recording over Zoom, so shenanigans happened. Long story short, it's on brand as usual. Sorry not sorry.
For the record, Kory, Japanese whiskey sounds awesome right now.
Yeah, this stuff's really good. I'm a big rum fan, and I'm normally into that like 10-plus-year-old rum, and this reminds me a lot of the rum that I like.
Awesome.
Is it, you drink it straight or is it a highball?
Straight.
Okay. Have you ever had like a good Japanese cocktail highball? It's delicious. I
have not. I'm trying to find it is. Okay, it's easy to find. It's Nika coffee grain whiskey.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so coffee is apparently how it is brewed. It is not actually coffee. The coffee is Coffey, named after the guy who invented this type of brewing.
It's called a coffee still. The guy invented the coffee still.
Yeah.
It's actually what they use in traditional Scottish Scotch.
Yes. Because the guy was telling me, he gave me this like wild breakdown where I guess all Japanese whiskey is their version of Scottish whiskey or something like that. I guess the Scots were the one who introduced whiskey. I forget the story, but it was really wild. Like Japanese whiskey has stories to it.
I'm Eric Slater.
I'm Chris Carroll.
And this is
Epic Fails of History,
a podcast that delves into the most epic fails of history.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The terribleness of the one of the worst catastrophes in the world still is called the humanity.
We had a problem here.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Epic Fails of History.
Just because you fail once doesn't mean you're going to fail at everything. Marilyn Monroe. So how's everyone's 2021 so far? We survived last year.
The world's still dying.
Nothing got magically better when the calendar turned over like we were all kind of hoping it would, but we'll see how we're doing in a month or two.
Fingers crossed.
It's been good. I've gotten busier in ways that I wasn't expecting and didn't necessarily want, but you know, I'm alive. And I'm not going to complain, and I have whiskey, so.
Hopefully some of that isn't the 60 podcast projects I, signed you up for.
No.
No. Yeah, no, that's understandable.
Yes and no.
So welcome back to Epic Fails of History. This is episode 23. We're kicking off season 3 today. And today I'm joined by my frequent co-host of Comic Zombie fame, Chris Carroll.
Hey.
We have Justin Aki, returning once again.
Hey, how's it going?
Definitely check out our episode on World War I way back on episode 3. It's definitely been way too long.
I still remember those postcards.
And last but not least, we have Kory Torjussen.
Yo.
He was actually featured on episode 18, our Earth Week special, and he's the host of the brand new podcast, The World is My Burrito, where, he talks about manga, all things kaiju, and everything in between. So yeah, you can also hear all four of us talk about the Bond movies over on this season of Podcasters Assemble. And today we're talking about the French Revolution. But first, we have a new segment. I guess I'll probably put in like a little sound clip. I'm not really sure yet.
Random Tales of Fail.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I learned about this while actually doing research for what became my very first episode of my podcast. But it was Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward Plan, which was also called the Second Five-Year Plan that only lasted 3 years. So you can probably guess how well that went.
Really well?
Yeah, very, very well. They did so well, they could just shave 2 years right off of that. But it's kind of funny learning about the French Revolution. There are a lot of similarities with the exception of the revolting. This is kind of probably the beginning stages of the French Revolution. But Mao Zedong had this wild plan to kind of skyrocket China's productivity for agriculture. And at that time, steel, this is in the 1950s, 1960s. So, he basically needed a ton of people to go on his side in order to get approved to this plan. And he talked to the peasants and put out a bunch of propaganda. And the peasants were like, yeah, man, we like this guy. We do whatever he wants. And this is one of the wildest immediate changes. So he gets approved to do this. And immediately they start doing mandatory agricultural collectivization. So private farming was banned. Anything that you farmed went straight to the government. They developed people's communes. So essentially living was banned, even to the point of private cooking was banned. If you cooked, it had to be for the people.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So they were increasing grain exports as kind of this facade of wealth. They were limiting, restricting what people could actually eat. People meaning the real humans, not the lizards who were pretending to be people. But actual humans like you and me would be limited on what they could eat. And then there was this massive stockpile of some 22 million tons that went into state granaries in case there was ever a famine. So as they're collecting all of this food from farmers, essentially in a way to sort of impress Mao, they were taking more than what they should have. They're like, oh, look, our farm can actually give you a lot more than what we said it could. So that ended up leading to the farms themselves not having food. So anyways, all this stuff happens very much like the French Revolution. The regular people and even the peasants who are now kind of on the same level are upset. They're literally writing letters to, nationals. And the nationals are like, no, there's not a famine. There is no war in Bastille. And yeah, it turned into just this wild show. And at one of the last things is, when they finally admitted that there was a famine, Mao blamed the peasants for stealing it, even though they were also still hungry. So it's this beautiful circle of Mao requiring the peasants to make this thing happen. And then at the very end saying, oh, the peasants did it. And then 2-3 years later, this guy starts the Cultural Revolution in China and was basically like, I did nothing wrong. Hey guys, you got to feel bad for me. It was everyone else.
Where have we heard that before?
That sounds really, really familiar.
But this resulted in tens of millions of deaths. So, the slight difference.
Yeah,
not to go too much further into it, because this should be a whole episode itself. I do remember reading that they actually gave away their seed grain too to show how much well they were doing. So they didn't even have enough to plant for the next crop season. Yeah,
the whole thing's a cluster. Mao's up there with Stalin for sure.
So, it's worth looking into. It could definitely be a whole episode because it keeps expanding and expanding the more you read into just this one 3-year point of history.
I think that's a case of, the road to hell's paved with good intentions. And I feel like, as we're about to dive into, the French Revolution kind of had a similar problem. A lot of people that were behind this event, they had, pie in the sky, dreams for what they were trying to achieve. And that's not at all the way it went.
It happens a lot when you have overthrows in power, generally because the people that do the overthrowing are then now what? And they don't have a plan for after. And that's catastrophe.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think it's, in its own way, it's kind of like a balance, which this I think is a pretty solid example. What we're gonna talk about is the people just saying, you know what, we're tired of being screwed over, let's screw back. And if it wasn't for that, it would not have worked its way out, because they would have just continued being oppressed. So it was one of those, someone somewhere needed to find a means to appease the people.
Well, I mean, you know, there's always a breaking point, you know?
Yeah.
It was the wicked and wild wind blew down the doors to let me in, shattered windows and the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become. Revolutionaries wait for my head on a silver plate, just a puppet on a lonely string. Oh, who would ever want to be king? I hear Jerusalem bells ringing.
It's funny, I remember reading about a lot of this stuff in like high school and college. Reading about the French Revolution and everything, and that whole era, and all like the horrific violence and torture techniques and everything that have come out of France over the years. Growing up always shocked me when I was reading about it, like in high school and college, because the stereotype for France here in America is that they are pushovers. You know, just because their government surrendered to the Nazis after they got the shit kicked out of them. But like, most Americans don't even know that the French resistance was the strongest, like most tireless resistance in the war.
Oh, without a doubt.
The French people are hardcore as shit. It's their government that's a little like floofy.
Yeah, I mean, look, with the stuff that I've been learning just today while doing research on this, well, I mean, honestly, we're going to talk about her. Literally the worst person was Marie Antoinette.
Totally.
It's like, yeah, she was floofy.
We'll definitely get into that.
In all fairness with her, I mean, she was taken from her homeland and like had to just deal. So
wasn't she like a
her
child
homeland of
too?
Austria? She lived with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
So this all started in the late 1700s. We have the Bourbon monarchy is in power. We have King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, who later would become known as Madame Deficit. They ruled from the Palace of Versailles, which was a, get this, 2,300 room, gold-plated, 67,000 square meter estate of just pure excess. This place was massive. It was like a whole theme park just for them.
How much does it go for an Airbnb?
Dude, that's literally like 10 Biltmore estates.
I mean, it still exists.
Jeez.
You know, the place is massive. It's something else, you know.
Quote the documentary Coming to America. You got money and you got money.
Exactly. I think one of the big factors that led to pure chaos, the revolution breaking out, was that France was separated into three classes. You had the nobility, which were basically the one percenters, the clergy, which was the church, and then the third estate, which was like everyone else. Basically the smelly peasants.
Oh, Chris, that's you.
But yeah, so the people at the top, they like lived in their own world. It was like a bubble. And they had no idea what it was like for everyone else.
Pure ignorance, or it was, just don't look at it.
Well, it was also like a literal distance, because one of the things I was watching was Louis had no idea this was really happening. People could talk about it, but they were so far away that they literally couldn't see it. I mean, imagine
the palace
being... Yeah, in a 67,000 square meter estate, you could get an exercise walking from one side to the other.
Yeah.
What is the point of going outdoors to even look at your city, let alone leave the city to look at what's happening around it?
And if you look at portraits of this guy did not get exercise. At all.
It's good to be the king.
You know, they just were naive to the situation.
To break into the third estate, don't forget also, the people actually part of the third estate showing up to the proceedings of courts and stuff. Mm-hmm. These were the top of, this is like the middle class. This isn't even the people doing the work too. Yeah. So, I mean, the third estate was the whole rest of the country.
Yeah, that has classes within it. Yep. So after the 7 Years' War and, of course, the American Revolution, France was in economic free fall. So while the wealthy were raising taxes, they were partying it up, the commoners were literally starving in the streets. The economy was so bad at one point that a quarter of all women were involved in prostitution, which that's crazy if you think about it.
Who was paying for it, though? I mean, if the quarter of the women are in prostitution, was it the rich paying to go slumming? I mean, that's actually a legitimate question right there.
Probably the clergy.
Yeah, the clergy.
Damn.
And it's because those who can make a buck are spending it. And so as long as you have like thousands upon thousands of people who've got an extra $7 a month lying around, I could definitely see something as, minimal as like prostitution being that big of a thing. Because anyone who has an extra franc lying around is like, heck yeah. Like even in modern times, we can relate to that. I think, the quarantine has shown that, whether it be viewed as sex work or, sex work adjacent, it can do very well in times of just no money or limited income for other people.
It's like, should I buy this loaf of bread for my kids or...
Back then, I mean, you got to think, okay, so if you're prostituting yourself out, that was actual income that you were not tied down to where you lived, because the 1%ers were landowners. They owned all the land. There was no private land except what they owned. So if you were a farmer, you paid rent to be working on that farm. Or if you lived in a city, someone else owned your house. Nobody owned things. So if you could, give yourself away for some cash, that was the cash you got, and you didn't have to pay some dude rent for it.
During all this, a dude named Maximilian Robespierre?
Robespierre.
Robespierre.
Not going to work here anymore.
It was like on the tip of my brain. I was
Maximilian Robespierre.
Robespierre. So this guy, he stepped up as the leader of the Third Estate, and he started demanding that the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes. Once again, sounds a little bit familiar to, current events. So after ignoring their pleas, the courts locked out the Third Estate. And so they literally held a meeting in a tennis court outside the courthouse and wrote their version of a Declaration of Independence. And they called it the Tennis Court Oath.
Doesn't quite have the same ring to it as the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
What if they had one of those giant chessboards out back? Would it have been like the chess court oath? Like,
that actually sounds cooler.
So from my understanding, and again, this was literally from just doing some stuff today, the tennis court oath specifically was an agreement that the people of the third party would continue basically to bug the ever-loving crap out of, the clergy and the royals until they got what they wanted.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like
basically.
their independence thing was later. This was their agreement to just be right bastards to people.
Yeah.
Until they got like freedom, until they could get their own Declaration of Independence.
Yep, exactly. This is sort of the preamble to all that. But yeah, considering all of this, Louis, instead of, trying to appease the people or listen to their demands, Louis decided to call in the troops from abroad. And within days, 30,000 troops surrounded Paris.
That sounds like a good use of, great use of time and money. And the food.
Yeah. It's really insane. Like, you're trying to de-escalate things. I don't know if martial law is really the right move here,
Well, we know where all those prostitutes were going.
Making good money inside Paris.
So a couple years ago, I was on a cruise with my family, summer cruise. Everyone goes on them. We learned the trick. July 4th, nobody celebrates it overseas, so it's a great time to travel. But for some reason, we couldn't get a July 4th cruise, so we took one the next week. We ended up going to St. Martin. It's a half Dutch side, half French side. And it's a great island. I love it. I've been there multiple times. I almost had my wedding there. It's fantastic. But we take the bus over to the French side because it's good shopping and great beaches. Get out. No one's around. Everything's closed. And they say, oh, it's Bastille Day. Damn it, I'm American. I came to the islands to spend money. People let drink. What the hell is this crap? Yeah, no, a tiny little island in the Caribbean celebrates Bastille Day because they are a French colony. So that's just a fun little story I have from travels.
That's pretty cool.
Well, next time you need an international calendar.
Right.
In my defense, I was like 15.
That's no defense.
Filthy American.
My dad's all stoked because today's the 4th of July. He woke me up at dawn to take a loyalty oath.
My mom's French, so we only celebrate Bastille Day.
Well, we could do something fun. How about a beach party?
Oh, great idea, Lise.
Yeah, I know where there's a beach.
I know where we can get some baguettes.
One of the other things I'd heard was, so not only were they raising taxes, because I guess it was one of those where raising taxes clearly made the people upset. So then they decided instead of raising taxes, they will just add taxes. So they're like, oh, you exist. There's a tax for that. Oh, you've got, windows in your home. There's a tax for that. You've got a child. There's a tax for that.
It's not 8% tax anymore. We're not going to raise it to 9%, but we're going to add 5 more 5% taxes. How about that?
Yeah. Basically. So they were taxing everything and just literally could not understand why the people were so upset. And keep in mind that the clergy and the rich never paid taxes. It was only third party.
Yeah, exactly.
So only the farmers, only the people who were breaking their back were the ones who were supporting Paris or supporting France.
I think that is really worth noting. That's an important factor.
So they're
to really
literally
put it in perspective.
And like physically and economically carrying the whole of France on their backs.
And this is like after the American Revolution. So like all that went down and they still thought it was a good idea.
Which the French supported and had our people.
Yeah, talk about hypocrisy.
Yeah, that was pretty messed up. Like when our revolution was over, we were going to be like, yeah, we'll help you guys out. And then when the time came, we were like, we really can't. I mean, we're just new. Like, let's just not do that shit.
Sorry, I've got this thing to do.
Yeah, it's like they helped us move. And then when it was their turn, our turn to help them move, we're like, my truck doesn't work. I got a thing. I'm sick. My cousin's in town. My job's in trouble.
My cousin's in town.
That's hilarious.
Funny enough, the French still appreciated us, and the guy who helped us out with our problem with the when he came over and trained our people, he came back like 50 years or 40 years later to like tour the Americas again.
Well, part of the reason the French Revolution happened was because people were inspired by what happened in the American colonies.
You'll be back, then you'll see. Wait, wrong revolution.